I love beetles. I'm going to be talking about beetles, creepy crawlies and insects. I have always loved beetles. I grew up in Burnley. It's in the northwest of England and there is not much to do there. So on quiet afternoons, me and my sister used to go in the garden and see what we could find. So we'd take a jam jar, we'd go out and we'd root around in the grass and do a bit of digging and find whatever creepy crawlies we could get our hands on. We'd put them in the jam jars and then we'd show them and compare them with each other. My sister used to take this one step too far. She then used to fill the jam jars with water and watch them drown. My sister is now training to be a GP, so take from that what you will. She's not practicing around here, she's still based down in Burnley, so you're all safe. So that's what we used to do, that's how much we love beetles, but tonight I'm going to be talking about one beetle in particular. This is the Tansy Beetle. So as you can see, this is the Ugly Animal Preservation Society. Everyone's been arguing about how ugly their animal is, and I want to argue for how beautiful this beetle is. So this is a beetle. It is so green and it is so shiny. So green and shiny, in fact, that the Victorians used to use it as a sequin. So they used to wear it. Now you might think this is strange, wearing beetles. However, not as strange as you may think. The next slide I'm going to show you is one of the most terrifying pictures of animal cruelty you have ever seen. So brace yourselves for this. This is a bejeweled beetle. This beetle is still alive, and these beetles were used on America's Next Top Model, and they are on a chain, and the supermodels walked down the runway with the beetles on them. I don't know what was more terrified, the beetles or the supermodels. I told you it was disturbing, but there you go, a bejeweled beetle. And just to note, this ring on my finger is not a beetle. It might look like a tansy beetle. It's about the same size, but it's not. It's just plastic. So, back to the tansy beetle. So the tansy beetle is very endangered. It only is found in a very small part of North Yorkshire. And I thought I'd use this map, as I am aware that I am in Aberdeen and not south of the border. So here, for anyone that hasn't ventured south, this is Yorkshire. This is where it is on a map. And actually, the tansy beetle is only found in very select patches of the River Ouse, which is around York. So this is the River Ouse. And you don't find it all the way around the river, you only found it in certain patches. And that's because the tansy beetle gets its name from the tansy plant. So it lives almost exclusively on the tansy plant. Unfortunately, the tansy plant looks a lot like a weed, a poisonous weed, ragwort, which is removed. So these habitats are removed quite often by mistake because people think it is a poisonous plant. Secondly, a lot of animals like to graze on the tansy plant, so they're removed. And then as a final insult, as York is quite a highly populated area, the council come along at the height of the beetle season and mow all the edges of the riverbank and mow away all the tansy plants and any of the tansy beetles on the tansy plant and chopped up. So the tale of the tansy beetle is quite a sad one. But I do want to share some things about the tansy beetle that I hope make you realise why it's worth saving and why it's special. So the habitat of the tansy beetle is being destroyed. So the tansy beetles have to find a new habitat. They have to find other tansy plant patches. Now if you're a tansy beetle, the tansy beetle is an amazing example of evolutionary adaptation. It is so well adapted to the tansy plant that it is absolutely useless at dealing with any kind of change in its life. So the tansy beetle is so well adapted it can't fly, and despite living on the edge of a river, it can't swim. That's been confirmed in laboratory tests that were not carried out by my sister. But there we go. So it can't swim and it can't fly. It can only walk. And if you're a beetle the size of a fingernail, walking between huge distances is quite problematic. So that's a problem for the tansy beetle. So it might be hard to find a new habitat, but as you can imagine, it might also be difficult to find a mate. Now, amazingly, if you walk along the banks of the River Ouse on a nice, warm, sunny afternoon, you might actually be greeted by this sight. And there's a lot of photographs like this that exist. This is the tansy beetle mating. And there are so many pictures like this because Now wait for this, this is one of the most impressive things about the tansy beetle. The tansy beetle has sex for a whopping 24 hours. That's right, one whole day. So I think the tansy beetle deserves some kudos for that. And that is the female tansy beetle on the bottom. And as this lasts for 24 hours, they need to continue to feed. So the female tansy beetle just continues to feed and eat and wander around the tansy plant. So that seems quite a good thing. Interestingly, there are populations of tansy beetle around Europe and in Russia, and the Russian tansy beetle has developed a rather original way of finding a mate. Well, when it finds a mate, due to its kind of lack of senses that it's got, it needs to make sure that it's mating with a beetle, and the right beetle at that. So what it does with its little antennae that it's got on its head, it talks its potential mate in the eyes, and then in the antennae, just to check that it's a beetle, and then it's the right beetle, and they mate. However, none of that exotic behaviour has ever been observed in Yorkshire. Well, it wouldn't have been, would it? And if anyone has ever dated anyone from Yorkshire, they would appreciate that. So, there we go. There's none of that goes on there. So that's the tansy beetle, and it's a bit about its sex life. So, if successfully mated, the female tansy beetle then runs away to lay its eggs. And you might think the best place for the tansy beetle to lay its eggs is on the tansy plant. But that's not the case. The female tansy plant walks away from the tansy plant to lay their eggs on a different plant, any plant, but not the tansy plant. This may seem counterproductive. However, this is another example of an evolutionary adaptation because the tansy beetle is actually a cannibal. It eats its own eggs. So it needs to leave the tansy plant, lay eggs elsewhere to prevent another tansy beetle coming along and eating the eggs of the tansy beetle. It's very complicated. So the tansy beetle walks away, lays its eggs, hopefully blindly finds its way back to a tansy plant somehow, and the eggs are left to hatch. So when the eggs hatch, the larvae are then on a different plant, and you think, oh, maybe the larvae can detect the tansy plant so they can get back to a suitable host. Sadly, no. They too cannot fly or swim, as confirmed in laboratory tests not carried out by my sister, and they have to wander wildly back to the tansy plant. Now, another statistic that was observed is that actually between 6 and 8% of the tansy beetle population each year dies from starvation because they accidentally wander away from their tansy plants and can't find their way back. But it is found that by altering the way that they walk, they've got better chances of survival. So I think it's bigger turns and smaller steps is the key if you're a tansy beetle that has wandered away from your tansy plant. So there we go, that's a little bit about the tansy beetle. Now you may think, why on earth do we want to try and save this beetle? It's doomed for failure. It's evolved so much, it is useless. But actually, the tansy beetle is very well studied. So there's studies about the tansy populations, and they've been creating mathematical models based on the tansy beetle dispersion, the conservation zones, and there are tansy beetle action groups. They're quite small, but they do exist. And they're always looking for volunteers. So if you're ever in York, please lend a hand. So the tansy beetle conservationists have mapped the dispersal, and actually they're providing mathematical models for insects, conservation, and insects and beetles are actually quite endangered. So it's reported that up to 20% or around 20% of all invertebrates are actually endangered. So by helping to save the tansy beetle, not only are you keeping ramblers, giving something to look at when they're out on a nice sunny warm afternoon in North Yorkshire, you're also helping to save the rest of the beetle population around the world. So please, vote tansy!
I know what you mean. I lost my virginity in Yorkshire. That's entirely true. It's a wonderful time to do that. This set can't get any better, actually, can it? I'll stop there. If you're going to go through York, it's something I really recommend. And this doesn't mean I had sex there, right? But if you go outside of York, they've got this thing called the Maze. It's a maze made entirely out of maize plants. And it's got the best advertisement in the entire world. Because it says, world's biggest maze? Question mark? Yeah, like speculation is your best way of advertising this really crap place. I can also tell some of you weren't very pleased by the whole cat thing that I said earlier. Alright, what it really boils down to is we just actually have to try and save the birds. So I'm sure you've heard all about those little bells they put around their necks, around the cat's necks to scare off the birds. Well, they don't work. They've tested and they found it's not the case. So what we're going to do is we'll get a necklace with a really big bell, so the birds can definitely hear it, and perhaps it'll be so weighty that the cats can't quite look up at the birds or breathe. And that's probably the best solution. It's time for you all to get voting. So you've got to be G'd up, make